Keely, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Cable. Good to see you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So last time you were here was maybe like a year ago or so, and we were discussing the mod case and a little bit about California ranchers taking it up the butt from the government when it comes to livestock loss and from wolf predation.
Yes.
So real quick, like what's the update with the mods and how are things going with wolves? I saw L.A. County had its first wolf sighting in 100 years last week.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, I don't think we have a lot of good news on the wolves. I think they're just gonna explode more and more in population and become more of a problem, especially for ranchers. I saw a story, I just made a video about this, but there was a mountain lion in Pacific Heights in San Francisco that they tranked and took out of the city limits, which cracked me up because of course they see that as totally fine, no mountain lions in Pack Heights, but we can have all the wolves in Northern California. They don't see any irony there at all.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, and then I saw it's also out of California last week. I saw that they made the mountain lion protected under their state, and they have a state endangered species list or some crap. Like
Yeah,
California banned mountain lion hunting in the early 90s.
yeah,
So you took hunting out of the equation, and here
yeah.
we are 30 something years later, and we're still having to protect them. So I guess hunting wasn't the problem.
I know. Right. That's such a good point. Yeah. Maybe too many predators, maybe just not managing any game well. But yeah, I don't know why they felt the need to do that. There's a lot of mountain lions. They don't seem to be having a population issue, but it's just California for you.
Hmm.
Um, but there is good news on the mods. I don't remember exactly where their case was at last time we spoke. Were they still waiting for news from the
Yeah, I mean,
feds?
uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they'd
So
had their
they,
guns confiscated and everything.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. So this is the ranching family that they were facing 10 years in prison each, both Heather and Charles. They're this young ranching couple in South Dakota, and they had like up to 250,000 in fines that they were facing, all because a fence that has been there since long before either of them were born suddenly came under scrutiny with the Forest Service. Forest Service said it was in the wrong place, and instead of just, discussing where it should be or kind of mediating some reasonable arrangement, that's very normal. As in the West, these boundary lines are disputed all the time. They
Uh-huh.
threatened them with trespassing on federal property and tried to throw them in prison. And both of them are, their parents to these young kids. They told them to find alternate guardians for their kids. Just insane. So we were waiting on news from that. Unfortunately, the Trump administration did step in. Brooke Rollins, the Secretary of Agriculture, her very first press conference as Ag Secretary back in May 2025, she, in front of the USDA building, had the mods there and announced that their charges had been dropped, apologized to
Mhm.
them. So that was great. And they were just in DC last week with with Brooke Rollins again. She did an announcement on kind of addressing that lawfare, like what they face, but sort of on
Mhm.
a systemic approach because there's so many cases of ranchers being mistreated in that way. So she wants to kind of do a whole of government approach to dealing with that. And she had them there to talk about their case again and just sort of show the need for that kind of affirmation.
Mhm.
So that's some good news. Yeah, on
Yeah.
their part.
Uh-huh. Very cool.
Yeah.
Glad that it's working out for them. It's
Yeah.
I mean, who needs to be persecuted more than people that are putting an effort into our food supply? Like
Right.
trying to make a living. Yeah, of course they're trying to make a living. Some do very well, but we need ranchers. Like and we need
Yeah.
farmers. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, like the court of public opinion wants to vilify these people,
Yeah.
and a lot of it's unwarranted. So,
Oh, completely. And we need them to do well because there's less and less of them and we need to eat. So if
yeah.
they aren't incentivized to do this job, which is a tough job,
Hmm.
then we are in trouble. So it's
Yeah.
good if they're successful.
Speaking of trouble, I saw today, and I didn't even know that I don't know if she's running again or what, but I saw Kamala was polling ahead of everyone for the 2028 Democratic nod, followed up by your governor, Gavin Newsom, who was like
Mhm.
6 points behind her. Um, What advice would you give the voting public as far as Governor Goodhair and having lived under his leadership and seen how he has done good things or bad things for California? What would you say? Hey, you've got a choice between this person or Gavin Newsom. What are you doing,
Yeah.
and why?
I mean, yeah, I think anybody but Gavin Newsom, I would most likely choose just about anybody but Gavin Newsom. It's so sad to see that and I'm not surprised. I think we've all seen this coming for a while. I was living in San Francisco actually back when he was the mayor there. So watching it I mean, that is a beautiful city. Like I don't love cities. I don't love living in cities. San Francisco is a beautiful city and it
I've been
should
there.
be yeah, what do you think of
Yeah.
it?
I went there
Depends
for a high
probably
school
what year you were there.
buddy's wedding about 10 years ago. And I liked
Okay.
like going to Fisherman's Wharf and eating the seafood. And it's like architecturally, it's very pretty. But like when a homeless guy walked up to me and asked for a bunch of cash, and I was like, dude, all I have is a credit card. And then he spit on me because I didn't have any money. I was like, I'm
Wow.
never coming back here. And I haven't been back
Exactly.
to California since. I'll spend my money somewhere else.
Yeah. No, I
It's
don't
a
blame
shame.
you.
It's such a beautiful state.
I know. It should be the most beautiful state in America. It's just a very special place. It's gorgeous. We have everything, mountains
Hmm.
and beach and all, it's just gorgeous up there. You have the redwoods, and I think San Francisco's history is amazing. I'm from Northern California. I'm kind of the rural north, a few hours north of San Francisco. So San Francisco is always our big city that we could go to, but it just has deteriorated so dramatically even since I was a little kid. And the homeless issue is, I mean, it's not just homeless, it's people who have people who are addicted to drugs and living on the streets and they need help and they need,
Uh,
it's become a destination for people from all over the country because of its reputation. So you have people overdosing, people dying on the street all the time. I'm sure you've heard we used to have like a literal, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here. We had like a feces map of San
oh yeah.
Francisco. So it was like, yeah, so you could I think this is like the middle of Silicon Valley. So some tech person, kind of tongue in cheek, made this app so you could see where all the feces was that day and make sure you avoided it on the city. But if you looked at the map, it was like the big brown
Yeah.
dot. It's like there's nowhere to go. And man, the stories from living there, that city just became so disgusting. And it's really sad because it shouldn't be like that. And that was while Gavin Newsom was mayor. So watching him run for governor, I could not believe that he won. And you just could see his ambition. He's such an ambitious guy. He obviously had aspirations to run for president even back then. And I'm not surprised at all that he's doing that. But I think people who visit California who know what it used to be like, or people like you who came to San Francisco and saw what it is. If you don't want the nation to look like that, you should not want this guy to run the
Mm.
country. And I think being a rural Californian, which we don't get a lot of airtime because we do have some of the biggest cities in the US, so that sucks up all the attention. But if you're from rural California, you don't like Gavin Newsom because he has destroyed rural parts of the state. He's ignored all our concerns. He's made life hell. We've had horrific wildfires under his watch, water mismanagement like you would not believe, farmers and ranchers going out of business because of his policies. So if rural America is paying attention, and I've said this before, to his governorship, they should be very scared because that's exactly how he is going to govern your state and your community.
Mm.
I know he's trying to sort of rebrand as like a working class blue collar guy, which is nonsense.
Right.
He's obviously the guy that went to the French Laundry in the middle of COVID. We are all going to remember that. We're not going to forget who he truly is. His dad was very close with the Gettys. Um, one of the wealthiest families in California history. I believe they have some of his um, inheritance or some kind of money changed hands there. He's related to the Pelosi's. So he's been set up for this. He's been chosen from a young
Huh.
age to run for office. And yeah, he's hardly a working class guy.
Well, and that's what you said, which is very obvious that he wants it. And to me,
Yeah,
that's like, but do you want it for America or do you want it because of your ego? And it's not the
completely.
former. He wants
Yeah.
it too much. Like it's not about making this country better. Far from it. I saw where Zuckerberg even pulled Facebook out of Facebook is leaving, and they're
Yeah.
moving to Florida because of some insane corporate tax that he had. And you're going to see the same thing in New York with Mamdani. Everyone's leaving. So if you can't tax the wealthy because they've left, what's still there?
Right. Exactly. The middle
Chaos.
class.
Yeah.
Right. And they're going to tax the middle class out of existence because California right now has become the ultra wealthy and the ultra poor. The middle class is increasingly forced out, which is
Mm.
how these policies always work. But now you're losing the ultra wealthy too. So you're just going to have um, the poorest people in the United States are going to be coming here for those benefits. And, it's not that I'm against having a social safety net or whatever, but it's not workable to bleed out your most productive citizens and to create these incentive structures for folks to not work and to have no accountability. It doesn't work. And we're seeing that. And, America's what it is because you have the chance to be successful as Mark Zuckerberg, as successful as all the billionaires who have made California what it is. It's not the other way around. You hear like,
Mm.
oh, well, you benefited from California, so you should give back. No, they have benefited our state. They have made our state great because that's what ingenuity does. That's what American enterprise and free thinking does. It makes our country great. And I think forcing those citizens out, I mean, it speaks for itself. These guys have the wealth and mobility to go wherever they want, and they're voting with their feet and they're leaving. So I don't
Mm.
really know how he could run with a record like that, but I think we're going to see him try.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, thank you for the Californians' perspective on, I
You're
mean,
stressing me out.
potential.
Now I'm
Yeah.
stressed thinking
Well, let's
about
talk about something
him.
else. Um,
Yeah.
what is your interpretation of how public land is supposed to be utilized in our country?
Yeah. Are you talking about the bison
Yeah,
story
the
specifically?
BLM
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But just your
In
Keely's
general.
personal view. What does the BLM website say? What is it supposed to be utilized for?
Right. Right. Well, multiple use, right?
Right.
For the good of the American people and not just for conservation, but for all of us to enjoy and to benefit from. I think that's the roughly
Mm,
the line. I'm not quoting it exactly, but yeah.
right.
What do you
And
think?
I think it should be. I think it should be hunted. It should be grazed. It should be mined. It should be
Yeah.
logged. All of
Amen.
these things, because that's what multi-use is.
Amen.
And we have in my sector of the hunting community, we have people on one side of the aisle that just, I sometimes want to call maybe they're rewilding is the word, or environmentalists that maybe they shoot a deer every year. Okay, well, that doesn't mean that you're really invested in the hunting community. And if you want to just rewild everything, well, that doesn't work. It's We have 330 plus million people in this country, and where yes, these animals had these historic ranges. There was grizzly bears in West Texas in the mountains. They're not going back there, and they shouldn't.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean we need to remove the grizzlies from Yellowstone and the other places that they're branching out from. That's not what I'm saying at all. But these animals have to have a place carved out for them.
Yeah.
Once it's gone, it's very hard to bring it back. And I could see, well, getting into this bison thing, I could see why people would be like, we need bison back on the American prairies. But at the expense of what? So there's a
Right.
trade off, right? And so
Hmm.
that's where I came across this topic. You posted about it, and since I've seen, entities like Outdoor Life pick it up, but essentially, regarding BLM rescinding grazing permits for a group called American Prairie and their private bison herd.
Yeah.
So, just give us a little more background. I wasn't really even familiar with who American Prairie was.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. I think it's an interesting story because exactly to your point, Cable, it's sort of the opposite of how you and I, because I agree with you in your view of how public land should be used. And this entity sort of represents the opposite. And I think there's a few things that people are misconstruing. It's not about bison versus cattle.
Right.
It's about the purpose of grazing. So the Taylor Grazing Act was passed in 1934 to protect domestic grazing and to allow ranchers and grazing operators in the US, specifically the West, to apply for grazing permits to graze public land, which at the time we understood was a benefit. It's good not only because we want food production in the United States and we all need to eat and we all need to have, it's very important that we're self-sustaining in the sense of producing our own food. And I think it's 500 million acres the BLM manages. Um, a lot of that needs to be grazed. It's, the West was always grazed by large ungulates, and it needs that for its ongoing um, abundance and for its ongoing health. That's an important part. These lands have always had grazing on them. There's sort of a symbiotic relationship between grazing and the landscapes that we love out here in the West. It's beneficial for wildlife, it's beneficial for clean water, for clean air, for open space, for all these things that we love. Grazing enables all of those things. It's important as a protection against fire, which we deal with here in the West. So we always understood up until recently that grazing was healthy. My dad has this line. He's a large animal vet, and I was telling him about some of the kind of crazy new um, environmentalist takes on grazing, such as cows being bad for the planet. And we've all heard that in the last few decades that cows grazing is bad for the planet. And he
Cow
said,
farts, and but meanwhile there was
right,
500 private jets in San Francisco for the Super Bowl. And these are the kind of
the
people that want to bitch about cow farts. The
exactly,
irony.
right, exactly. It's totally absurd. And that's what my dad said. He said something like, cows grazing is the planet. It's not bad for the planet. It is the planet. This is how nature works.
Mm.
This is how our especially here in the West, how our giant, essentially savannas function. So anyhow, that's an important part of public land management is these grazing permits, and they've always been used for that purpose. And for domestic livestock specifically. And I'm sure in 1934 they didn't think they needed to define that because this wasn't a controversy,
Right.
but now it is, of course. So American Prairie, they applied for grazing permits, but not to raise cattle for domestic production, not to raise sheep for wool and food. Um, but to raise bison to rewild, exactly the term that you use, to
Mm.
rewild the Great Plains. And that is an abuse, in my opinion, in the opinion of the Trump administration, which overturned their grazing permits. That's an abuse of the grazing permit system.
100%. I couldn't be more proud of them for overturning them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's the reason why. What value am I getting out of those bison other than, oh, it would be cool to see bison in their once historic habitat, right? That'd be cool. I
Right.
get it. It sounds really nice. But now there's no cows. So
Exactly.
how am I benefiting? Like me and my family and the average American? I mean, they're not. And then
They're
if you look
not.
at like these green decoy environmental groups like BHA, they're throwing a fit about it. And they're like, well, maybe one day we could draw tags and go hunt them.
I'm
Okay,
sure
cool.
that'll
So like
happen.
maybe like 10 of us a year gets to go hunt a bison and the rest of us just take it in the shorts and we have to deal with the lack of beef
Yeah.
production that once existed there. And it could be, who knows if they're managing 500 million acres. I don't know how many do you know how many acres American Prairie had locked up?
Yeah, they had 63,000 acres on, I believe, just federal land. I mean, they own some ranches too, but I think that was
Mm.
just federal land that they had permits on.
That's a lot of head of cattle
A
that
lot
you're
of,
taking out of the
yep,
equation. And I wonder what the size of their bison herd is. Because
about
as they keep
900.
adding permits, their goal is to get the herd larger and larger.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think they were running about 900. That's what people at least estimate. I don't know if their numbers are public, but
uh-huh.
yeah, you're exactly right. And I mean, it's not just the fact that this one specific entity was using grazing permits in a way that isn't beneficial to Americans, which is what permits are for and what public land is for. It's the precedent that it sets because ranchers can't compete with NGOs like American Prairie, which
Mm.
have, I mean, I have a list here in front of me of folks involved with American Prairie: Susan Packard Orr, daughter of one of the Hewlett Packard guys, members of the Mars family, the heirs to the Mars Candy Fortune. These are the folks that are, either on the board or they're donors of American Prairie.
Oh, wow.
The average rancher cannot compete with that kind of influence. And we know that the influence peddling happens even with permits like this. So when you set up a precedent where if you have an NGO, you have a nonprofit, you set up a 501c3, and you're able to compete with your average rancher to use grazing permits, then you do have a problem at scale where, yeah, our families are affected because there's less cattle and it's all locked up by the wealthy and elite who know better, who get to run whatever animals they choose. And I mean, there's absolutely an argument to make for running domestic bison and for grazing just like cattle, but these are specifically treated as wild animals. They say on their website, they're raising these bison herds to mimic wild herds as closely as possible.
Right. And I was going to say, if you told me that they're going to put roughly the same number of bison on the landscape that where there once was cattle, and they're going to have a self-sustaining herd, but they're going to slaughter X number every year, and that it's going into our food supply, I'd be like, oh, okay, that, you know,
Sure.
do it, to a limit. I don't want bison's expensive. Maybe that would bring the price down. But if you put bison there and take the cows off and you don't let us use it for food, then the price of beef is only going to keep going up, which is already very expensive. Um, but the worst thing that could happen, and then I saw a lot of people being like, well, maybe the government should own the bison. Hell no, they shouldn't. I don't want the government to own crap. I do
No.
not. We want so they're like, well, if you want it to be go back into the food supply, then the government should oversee the herd. And then so the government can have more say over our food supply. I don't want that.
Yeah, no,
So
they
the only
because of
way this
their
would
record.
work is if it stayed in private hands, in the private sector, and then we were slaughtering them and, just like we were cattle.
Yeah.
So,
And there's already different land management tools. I mean, we have wilderness designation in Yellowstone. They run by, there's wild bison in Yellowstone. It's not that we don't have areas of our public land that are just for wildlife, that you can't hunt and you can't run domestic cattle, you can't mine. I think people need to get a little more acquainted with our public land system. Like there's different types of public lands, but the
mm,
vast majority of public lands, I mean, people think immediately of like Yellowstone, Yosemite, they think of our national jewels. Those are national parks. It's different. They're not under the BLM. They're already protected. You already can't mine in Yellowstone. You're not going to run cattle in Yellowstone. That's already a wilderness designated, protected forever for us to kind of see what the West used to look like, places that are specifically designated for their cultural or environmental value and for being like these special places that we do want to preserve sort of in their original state for us to see and enjoy. There are places like that. The problem, even under Biden, he was over using that designation to lock humans out of places like
mhm.
there was a few different spots that he designated wilderness, and it's just this sort of blanket designation of millions of acres that are suddenly inaccessible to the public. And that is, again, it goes to this sort of underlying worldview of keeping human beings out. Human beings are bad. Any type of productive use is bad. Hunting is bad. Fishing is bad. The only acceptable use of land is to abandon it, lock it away. That's how it remains pristine, which I don't agree with. I think that human stewardship makes land better and human management makes it better. And it's just a fact of life, exactly like you said. There's no more grizzlies in Texas. When humans enter an environment, it changes because we're also part of nature. We're also part of the food chain. So that's just going to happen. And it's whether you're going to accept your role as a, part of nature and a part of the cycle of life
Mhm.
or not.
Yeah.
You can be delusional if you want to, but
Mm.
nature's going to keep on doing what it does.
Well, and I always giggle when I see these people say the, the grizzly's the apex predator. No, I am the apex predator. Would a grizzly kill me in hand-to-hand combat? Yeah, but I have a gun, and it doesn't. And I am the apex predator. I walk on 2 feet. We have this conversation, and like you use the word delusional, that's what they are. If you don't think man is the apex predator, then you're denying your own existence. Um, but yeah, I also going back to the rewilding thing, I saw obviously wolves have been a major hot button issue in Colorado for the last 5 years or so. And there was this one guy, they had a Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting, and he was there speaking, and the video went kind of viral, but you might have seen it. He said,
Hmm.
you know, if we can't get people to cooperate with the wolves, then we will use eminent domain to take their property so that the wolves can live in peace and harmony without human interference. Like you just said, lock up the land so that we can't use our own land. Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
there's places we share the land with the wolves. We share it because we've chosen to. And yeah, there's that mindset of we'll just take your land so that the wolves can live in peace and harmony. I think nature is a very
Totally.
peaceful and harmonious place.
It's so delusional and it's so removed from reality. These people are sheltered. They've never had to deal with the consequences of their own ideas. They live in cities a lot of the time.
Hmm.
It's exactly like that San Francisco story where, you had this mountain lion wandering in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in San Francisco, and they could not allow that to happen. And these are the same people that think that we need to have unlimited wolves in Northern California, unlimited wolves in Colorado, no management of predators in California. We banned mountain lion hunting in the 90s. You're not allowed to hunt bears with dogs anymore, making it very difficult to hunt black bears in California. So we have an overpredation issue in California in general. It's gotten really, really bad. Um, and they see no problem because they don't have to deal with it. But the second there's one mountain lion in Pack Heights, they cannot allow that. They can't have that. It's uncomfortable for them. It might eat their cat.
Right.
So it just really is a totally sheltered, removed worldview where they really think I genuinely believe they would do exactly what that guy said in that meeting of taking land for eminent domain for wolves. A lot of folks would do that if they could. I think Jared Polis, the governor in Colorado, I bet he
Oh yeah.
secretly agrees with that. He just knows he can't quite get away with it yet. But I think that guy just said the quiet part out loud. I think that's how a lot of them think.
Hmm. Well, and it's his husband is the
Oh
real
gosh, yeah.
Marlon Race, I think is his name, and he is a diehard animal rights activist that Polis is married to, and so his husband is the one that's really, if you look and pull the veil back a little bit on the wolf reintroduction and Prop 127 with mountain lions, it's him, you know,
Mm.
and
So is he the guy that had that? He said some crazy stuff on Facebook a couple of years ago. I think he got
I'm
called
pretty
out
sure,
for,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, but you mentioned Yellowstone earlier, and I'm sure you know Charles Whitwam over at Howell for
Yeah,
Wildlife, or have
yeah.
crossed paths. Anyway, have you heard their or seen their new documentary, Killing Catalina?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Catalina Island, and they're planning on eradicating the mule deer herd there, which has been there for 100
Sure.
years. And I can see both sides of the argument when you're talking about a non-native species, but they've been there for 100 years. And their thing was, well, they're destroying the vegetation. But they've been there for 100 years and they haven't destroyed the vegetation yet.
Right.
And, but what he said about Yellowstone was that Yellowstone's a zoo. And people don't realize that. It's basically a
Mhm.
giant zoo, void of any, like you said, no, there's no livestock production there.
Right.
It's a massive zoo, but it's there for our enjoyment, just to look at it, how things used to be.
Mm.
You're not going to find that anywhere else.
That's a
And
good point.
I don't
I never thought
know
of it like that.
that necessarily you should, because like going back to the eminent domain thing, you're not, unless you just start taking people's land, how are you going to do that?
Right.
So I don't know. It's
Right.
crazy. But
That's a
that
good point.
that Catalina thing is interesting because they don't. My biggest takeaway from the conversation I just had with him is that the Catalina Island Conservancy doesn't want a real deer count because then it might expose, because they're saying there's 1,800 deer. Charles put enough thermal drones up to know, and the outfitter that's been there since the, I think, late 90s has been on the island for 30 years. He's like, dude, there's not 1,800 deer here. He's like, no,
Mm.
we're not even half of that. but they've offered to do an actual thermal drone, cover every square mile of the island, like a survey. And the lady running it is like, no, we don't want to do that. But then
Mm,
California, what is it? It's California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
yeah.
Uh, they still consider, even though the mule deer are not native there, they're still considered native mule deer by the state.
I didn't know
So
that part. Why is
why
that? Because
is
they've been here for a certain amount of
well
time,
they're
or why would
they're
that be?
California. It's in California. They're native species to California.
Oh, just
The
not the
genetics
island.
came from California before they were introduced there.
Got
So
it.
so you're still beholden to California hunting regulations while hunting on the island, but the California C what is it, California D,
CDFW.
they don't want to have
Yeah.
anything to do with it.
Mm,
So they're just going to let the
interesting.
conservancy just go in and wipe out this deer herd, and they're not really even commenting. And that's why Charles is trying to turn the screws on them to be like, hey, where's the science to support this decision?
Yeah.
And they've been mum on the whole deal.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I understand. I was trying to learn more about that. Catalina is close to me here in Southern California, and it's really beautiful. But all of those Channel Islands have a pretty interesting history. I've done a lot of reporting on them.
Mm-hmm.
So Catalina is the biggest, or at least it's the only one with kind of a permanent, significant human settlement.
Yeah.
The Wrigley family originally came and brought in mule deer and buffalo and or bison and all these different things, which nobody has a problem with the bison, even though they're
Right.
certainly not native. But I think it has something to do with the hunting. That's my opinion. Charles makes a pretty good case for it. But I do think they'd need a pretty aggressive doe cull if they were to manage the population on the island, which I don't know if people have the stomach for something like that. You tell me, you know more about hunting is your lane, but that's my understanding is they would need to be pretty aggressive with doe management.
Yeah.
And maybe they just don't think people are going to be able to deal with that, so they'd rather eradicate them all. But doesn't that just highlight what we're talking about? It's like instead of just having reasonable management, where yeah, you do have to look death in the eye because that's part of nature. You have to deal with it. You're the apex predator. You have to be responsible for managing other predators and game, or else there are serious consequences. The deer do cause a lot of havoc if they're overpopulated on the island and there's nowhere else for them to go. It's an island.
Right.
Um, but rather than look at that and deal with that and kind of stomach the reality that yeah, we can't have a light footprint on Earth. We think we do because we all live in cities and we have AC and you buy meat at the grocery store. You think that you're not really a cruel person, you don't really have an impact on nature, but somebody's doing it for you. You're just outsourcing it. You just don't have to
Right.
look at it, you know? So
Yeah.
it's the same on this island where people they don't want to have to look death in the eye. They just don't want their shrubs eaten, but they don't want to have to know how that sausage gets made. So let's just kill all the deer, which is so much more inhumane,
Mm-hmm.
total just wasteful. Um, but that's easier for people to wrap their head around for some reason rather than every year we have to have pretty aggressive management if we want to have this population. But the deer are going to be healthier, the island's going to be healthier because it's not going to be overrun, and that's just how it is. So
Mm-hmm. But
pretty ironic.
they've never implemented an actual doe management plan. So their
Mm.
solution is, and Charles said, I think personally it's just because they don't want any hunting on the island
Hmm.
because they're anti-hunters,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so if they can just kill them all, then they can just do away with hunting in perpetuity. Um, but he asked her, he's like, hey, what is your management plan? And she goes, well, what do you mean? Like we've never really had a doe call. He's like, well, if you're telling me there's 1,800 deer here, like what is the magic number? Would it be 300? Would it be 400? Like how many would you allow?
Yeah.
And her response was, well, we're just going to take them all out because we don't. But the craziest thing about that whole story to me was that Charles was, well, the situation and then shining the spotlight on it led to hunting organizations and the Humane Society being right there protesting together. I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Never.
But it makes sense. I
Right.
sometimes I think these environmental groups, they don't like animals. It's like it doesn't seem like they really like wildlife. It's all like it's an excuse to push an agenda which is anti-human. It's like it's all about getting humans off. I think that sounds probably a little out there, but I really think that's true because you see that, last year I covered the Point Reyes shutdown. They were trying to force these ranchers out because of tule elk that need Point Reyes, and the cattle are interfering with tule elk habitat, so we need to get the ranchers out. But then a few hours north, I'm covering another story where they want to remove these dams and dry up a lake called Lake Pillsbury. So they want to remove the Potter Valley Project dams, dry up Lake Pillsbury, and there's a huge tule elk population by Lake Pillsbury.
Huh.
And yeah, they're already issuing more hunting tags. I've heard rumors that they're talking about culling this herd very aggressively because they're all going to die without this lake. That's fine. They don't see, a problem with that. So
Hypocrisy. Yeah.
we'd rather take out the dams here. It's going to dry up all these ranches and farms in Northern California, and it's going to kill the tule elk, but that's fine. But if we can use it in Point Reyes to get the ranchers out, then we'll pretend like we care about elk. You know what I mean? So it's just
Yeah.
ultimately, how do we get humans out? How do we hurt human freedom? And if we can use wildlife as like a cudgel to do that, we will. And I think that's what's happening on Catalina. I mean, people should look into like Santa Rosa Island, Santa Cruz Island, just really dark stuff. They've done this before. They called all of the Roosevelt elk and mule deer on Santa Rosa Island from helicopters to National Park Service, just gunning them down. And then on Santa Cruz Island, the Nature Conservancy took over a lot of land there from a rancher, passed away, and they ended up exterminating all of the wild pigs there. Um, so they've done this before, and I don't think it got as much
Mm.
publicity as the pre-internet, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of history on Channel Islands I've
Hmm.
written about. It's very sad. People that were there, I've talked to families that used to live there. It's still very raw for them, very, very painful because you care about these animals. A lot of them had hunting programs on Santa Rosa Island. They had a hunting program, and just to watch them get slaughtered and wasted, it's like it truly did scar these ranching families who I think cared a lot more about wildlife than the Park Service did, and then the
Mm.
Nature Conservancy did.
Mm. Um, Going back to the American Prairie
Yeah.
situation, um, I made some comments on some feeds, and then people were like, "Well, you can't compare bison and cattle. They have a different ecological footprint on the landscape." I'm like, "Are they both ungulates, and do they both eat grass?" And if the answer is yes, then maybe one eats more than the other. I don't know, but you can figure out what the carrying capacity is. But what is your understanding on? Is there some grand biological difference between a bison and a bovine domestic livestock
No,
as far as their impact on a
no,
prairie? They're
no.
about the same size. They eat the same
Yeah.
thing. Their poop's brown.
Well, I think they're the same species. I guess there's some little designation. The definition of a species is can they interbreed and produce fertile offspring? And you can interbreed cattle and bison and produce fertile offspring and have a
Huh.
beefalo. So to me, they're the same species. I guess there's some little caveat that some people are going to raise. I don't know. That makes sense to me. Like if they're that close in similarity that they can produce fertile offspring by interbreeding, I think we can, cut the bullshit with the bison chicks. It's all the same thing. It's no difference.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
it's just like an argument people use to sort of, it's just against cattle in this case. And cattle are more domesticated. They're easier to handle. Bison are bigger and meaner and scarier.
hmm.
So they're less easy to manage. They're wilder. Um,
They go through
so
fences a lot more
they do.
frequently. We have ranches in
Yeah.
Texas that have them, and
Yeah.
like they'll go through a fence where cattle will not.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're less easy to manage, and we've bred cattle to be domestic so people can handle them because we have such a huge cattle industry in the West and especially there in Texas. So, it's part of our food system now. It's part of the American West, part of what settled the West. That's just reality. So, and I was just I'm reading this book about the history of the West called Cattle Kingdom. It's really interesting, but talks about how when the bison were wiped out, some people at the time thought that the American military was doing that on purpose to starve out the natives and force them to rely more on the US government for rations. And whether that was intentional or not, that is what happened. That is the effect. So we should look to history. If you're trying to kill off cattle, which is absolutely what people are trying to do, the myth we talked about earlier about cattle being bad for the planet, that is such a crazy psyop. It really would take like a whole media government elite effort to try to convince you that grazing cows are bad for the planet. We know on a gut level as humans that that is just not true. You know, you
Right.
see cows grazing off the side of the freeway and you don't think like, wow, what a biohazard. That's horrible. It's like driving by smokestacks. Like we know that that's good. We know that that's what nature was designed for. So it's like anti everything we know. It's anti our instincts and how we function biologically to think that this is bad for the planet. I think it has to be such an intentional effort by whoever is pushing this narrative, that ultimately I do think it's about control and we've seen that before with Native Americans when they wiped the bison out. So
Mm. That's a great
yeah.
point. Yeah. And speaking of Native Americans, it's also important to point out they've joined sides with American Prairie. 50, I think it was 50 tribes or something like that.
Mm,
And so I don't want to like discredit what they're saying. It doesn't make it right. Like, I mean, when Billie Eilish did her famous stolen land thing,
yeah.
my response was, "You lost the war. Like you were conquered. That's human history. Just like you know, we domesticated cattle so that they were easier to manage. Well, yeah, human history is every piece of land has been fought and bled over for thousands of years,
Right.
and the Native Americans were killing each other. They're warring with each other. It's not a unique thing, but we have to pretend and like walk on eggshells. And did we treat them good? No, no, we didn't. But generally,
No.
that's how war goes. And
Yeah.
there's always a winner and a loser. And
Yeah.
I'm not besmirching the fact that they're brave warriors or anything like that. It's just technologically, or maybe you weren't ruthless enough. I don't know, but you didn't win, and I'm not making an apology for that personally.
Right. Well, Texas, the history of the Comanches. I don't think. Have you ever read
Amazing
that book?
warriors.
Oh my goodness.
I've
What was
hunted
that
on a
book?
place. So actually, where I shot my first buck ever in my life, um, my buddy, it's his family's land, and he has the newspaper clipping in his living room of the last Comanche raid in, I don't remember if it was in Texas. Might have been the last fatal raid. Anyway, it was like his great grandmother times four, and they were there on the homestead. And at the time, they used to raise apples. I didn't even know we really had apple production in Texas back then. But the men had loaded up the wagons and were taking the apples to market, which was like 30 miles away. So they're gone multiple days. And the Comanches came and they killed 11 women and children. Two of them escaped, one out of a window, and then one they thought they had killed and left for dead, and that one survived, which ended up being like his great whatever grandmother. So crazy story, but
Wow.
yeah, I mean that was, I mean, it wasn't like both sides weren't killing each other.
And it wasn't that long ago either.
No, yeah,
Yeah, no, they were very impressive warriors. I can't remember the name of this book on Comanche history that was like a bestseller a couple years ago. But it's just it kind of made me rethink sort of the national image we have of Native Americans is that Wounded Knee statue. And I don't know that that's fair to a lot of these tribes, which
I've
were,
I've
I
been
mean,
to Wounded
they,
Knee. It's very cool.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, and that's part of history too. And where I'm from in Northern California, there's really horrific history of the government mistreating tribes there, actually, really, really horrific that I don't think has been covered as much as some other places of Pomo tribes and history of Round Valley and these different things. But in Texas, I mean, they gave the American government a run for their money. I'm pretty sure Mexico kind of gave that area to the U.S. government because they just gave up trying to run the Comanche out. They were like, "You deal
yeah,
with it."
right.
So it's not like this pathetic, beaten down nation. It's like we almost struggled to settle Texas because of how impressive these
Mm,
people were, like the
yeah,
greatest horse warriors in history.
yeah. And I've made
And
myself sound like some callous jerk, like which isn't it.
no,
I love Native American history, and I respect the hell out of them. But I'm also going to point to reality, and there was a war, and there was a winner, and there was a loser.
Yeah, no,
And
you
that's
don't sound like a jerk because that is reality, and that kind of is exactly what we were just saying about people just being too precious to deal with the realities that they benefit from. You don't want to allow hunting, but you live in a place that benefits from hunting management. You don't want to think about cattle being killed because that makes you uncomfy, but you eat beef and you have leather seats in your car and you just benefit from other people dealing with reality.
you don't
And
want
so
to
our
give up
ancestors,
your $15 million mansion to the Tongva tribe,
right.
but you want to grandstand at the Grammys and act like how you're just this. You know,
Yeah,
it's all political pandering.
I
Why
know.
the elites think they need to get involved in that stuff is beyond me. But I saw that and I was like, wow, what a moron.
Yeah. Didn't that tribe reach out to her? The tribe
Yeah, the
that
Tongva
her
tribe.
house is on their land? Yeah.
Yeah,
She could
she
give
didn't
it
give it back
back.
to him. No,
No. And if you're not going to give it back, shut up. Like
right.
if you benefit from these realities, which we all do in some way because we're all here, so our ancestors survived and they probably didn't always survive in the most politically correct ways, but we're here because they survived. And
Yeah.
that is the reality of our modern society that rests on a lot of hard work of others that we now want to deny. And and I also have learned just from reporting on some of these issues in the West that, even that dam issue I mentioned earlier, if you see coverage of it, they'll say the tribes are for it. But that is not the case because there's a lot of tribes that are against it, but they haven't come out and spoken on it, or they just haven't been given the microphone by the media because the media will pick and choose which tribes they want to listen to based on the narrative that they want to push. So they
Mm-hmm.
really tokenized, in my opinion, um, tribal people a lot because they think that that gives them a permission to say what they want to say. And I think you have to be careful about that because, saying that the tribes support American Prairie, well, do they, or do certain tribal members, or does the tribal council, or are there tribes that don't support it that you just haven't heard from?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah. So as it stands right now, these permits have they just been entirely canceled?
Yeah, as I understand, yeah,
So what
they
is
were
so
rescinded.
what happens to their bison herd?
Well, they own a bunch of ranches, so I guess they're just going to have to get off. Their goal was to create one of the biggest nature reserves in the world. So they're trying to buy up all these private ranches and connect them with federal lands to create 3.2 million acres of contiguous short grass prairie. And so they're using their bison as like the Trojan horse to get access to these federal lands and make sure cattle aren't running on them and make sure nobody else is using them. So that was kind of their strategy. So they still have a lot of private acres that they own, which is a whole other issue. All of these massive conservation groups buying up ranches and rewilding them across the West is an issue for sure, taking them out of production. They've done that, but now they don't get to run bison on federal land anymore. Not at
It,
least until the next administration comes in.
not Gavin Newsom.
No, please, God.
Well, this administration hasn't been perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it was
No.
far better than the alternative from my viewpoint. No questions asked. We got Mike Lee's proposal shot down, and that ended up being a very uh, nonpartisan issue.
Yeah.
Everyone that appreciates public land came together. So let's not do that. And I've said it's not that some of that land shouldn't be sold. It absolutely should. It's not good habitat, and you want to put houses there. I'm for that, but you can't write it so broadly and it be that obtuse to where who knows what's going to happen. And if you give them a blank check, you're not putting the genie back in the bottle. Like I don't trust the
Absolutely.
federal government. Like I wouldn't want the Fed. Like I just said, I wouldn't want them controlling a bison herd that we need for food. Absolutely not. And I don't want them to have a blank check to sell off public land because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And that's why I'm like,
No.
if you want to, and people, all these people complaining about it, don't even remember, which happened 4 years ago, that Biden sold off public land in uh, Nevada.
Yeah.
for
Right.
development, right? It wasn't a huge piece of land, but that kind of stuff. And it might have even been that if they sell X, they have to buy X back. I don't remember if that's actually law or not, but nobody complained about him doing that. It wasn't good habitat. And so in those situations, I think we need to be open minded and be like, there is public land that's not really suitable for wildlife. So if you want,
Yeah.
and we have, I don't know if anyone's noticed, a housing shortage. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with that kind of stuff, but Mike Lee, that was a terrible idea. And then there's a lot of complaining going on right now about the boundary waters. I've been to the
Hmm.
boundary waters. I've spent 6 weeks total of my life in the boundary waters. It's beautiful. It's pristine. I love it. And I'll tell you right now, I would still be for mining it. That's what it's multi-use. And you, it's not like they're going to mine the whole thing or that it's going to affect the whole thing. So people don't want to hear that. They call me like, oh, that you're just a boot-looking Trump supporter. I'm like, no, I'm just someone that believes public land is for multi-use. Um, so instead of locking it up so that we can't utilize it.
Yeah. Because you're not, these same people that criticize, they're still benefiting from oil and gas and meat and rare earth minerals and everything else. It's just taken from somewhere else on Earth that they don't have to look at. Again, same thing. Don't have to deal with the
Hmm.
consequences. There's less labor protections in other places where these things are happening. There's less environmental protections. We should want, if you're really an environmentalist, you should want all of that to happen here where we can keep an eye on it, where we have the highest standards in the world for labor and environmental impact and all these things. We should say, hey, I don't love that my entire life revolves around this rare earth mineral or gas or whatever, if that's how you feel, but it does, and I'm not giving that up anytime soon. So I need to, be an adult and
Hmm.
deal with the process of it getting to my house and make sure that it's as responsible as possible. But so
Yeah.
it's exactly like you're saying. It's just like people don't want to reckon with the realities. They want to scapegoat the folks who make their lives possible, every single aspect of their lives possible, whether it's hunting or mining or what have you. They want to scapegoat those people, and I think that that must be just a base human instinct, but we've never been able to indulge in that luxury so much as we can right now, where we are so sheltered and privileged, and life has become so convenient and comfortable that you don't really have to look reality in the eye anymore if you don't want to. And what
Yeah.
a privilege that is. We are so blessed in this world to live in such a luxurious, comfortable society that you can really spend your whole life completely disassociated from all of the things that make your life possible. But that doesn't discount the fact that it's happening somewhere just out of your view.
I mean, you're making a decision to
Yeah.
basically exist in a realm of cognitive dissonance. It's like in the back of your mind it's happening, but it's out of mind, out of sight, out of mind. And I personally don't want to make my enemies wealthier. I don't want to rely on China for anything else.
Right.
We need these minerals. Okay, well, do we have them in our own backyard? Yes. Okay, well, let's get them there. That sounds like a better option. So, no, no,
Yeah. It's
it's
like it's almost like the world's like increasingly divided between people who are willing to face reality and people who aren't, because all of a sudden we have this luxury that nobody's talking about where you really don't have to face reality if you don't want to. You
mm-hmm.
can live in your little air conditioned apartment your whole life. And what do you do when you live in a democracy and half of the people want to face reality and deal with it because they work in it or live in proximity to it, or at least are willing to acknowledge its existence, and half don't because they don't have to, because they get to be Billie Eilish and live in a mansion on ancient tribal land, but also accuse everyone else somehow of having stolen that land. And she's not a beneficiary and she's removed from it. That's not reality. That's not
No, and
reality.
it's not just Billie Eilish.
No.
Every American,
Yeah,
theoretically, is existing on
yeah,
stolen land. But it's not every American. It's every person in the entire world. Somebody
absolutely.
stole
Yeah.
it from someone at some point in time. Stole it. They fought and they won. They conquered them. Whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't see any of them lining up to give it away, to give it back to them. Where are you going to go? The next
No.
place is going to be stolen too.
Yeah. Did you see there was Marco Rubio gave a speech at the Munich National Security Conference on Sunday or Saturday, something like that. And he talked about how our history is tied to Europe and how the
Oh,
history
I
of the
know where you're
cowboy came
going.
from Spain. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then AOC was trying to debunk him, and she's like, the history of the cowboy came from Spain. Well, I know some, the history of enslaved African peoples and Mexicans would beg to differ. And it's like, ma'am, your name is Cortez, and you don't understand where horses came from on the American continent. Like, just the cognitive dissonance, exactly like you said, is so extreme that one of our most famous representatives can just live in that bubble if she wants to.
Let's listen to it.
Yeah.
Culture. My favorite Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture.
The best culture.
My favorite part was when he
Yeah.
said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that. Rubio's speech.
Yeah. Okay, lady.
What an idiot.
The Spaniards introduced horses to the Americas in the 1500s. So there you
There's
go.
still not a there still isn't a large domesticated horse population in Africa. What is she talking about?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. It's mind blowing. Mind blowing. And
Yeah.
then, so I mean, the Native Americans didn't even have horses. They
No.
adapted very quickly and began hunting with them and using them to fight battles and very successfully. But that was a new technology to the Native Americans. I mean,
Yeah.
this woman, and she's going to give Gavin a run for his money.
I mean, she's more charismatic than Gavin. I'll give her that. At least she genuinely believes what she says. I don't think Gavin believes anything. I really don't, because he will say whatever he needs to say. She
Yeah.
seems like a true believer, for better or worse. But no, again, her last name is Cortez, so
Mm.
she should be a little more read up on this,
Right.
where the horses came from.
So I interviewed this guy, this Congressman Riley Moore of West Virginia, a couple weeks ago, and I asked him point blank, like, who do you think will get the presidential nod for Democrats in 2028? And he said, if AOC wants it, she'll get it. And I was
Mm.
like, well, okay, at least it's not Gavin, but also she's a full blown socialist. So that's not good either. The cupboard's pretty
No,
bare over there.
no.
But
I'm gonna stand by what I said. I would still choose her over Gavin.
mhm.
Anyone but Gavin, 2026. But no, she is a socialist. So that would be a dark day if we saw ourselves like, 50-50 shot of having a socialist as the president. That would be a pretty sad repudiation of what we just decided in the
Uh,
20th century were the worst ideas ever invented.
I mean, I think it leads to the just breakup of the country ultimately, because, like
Yeah,
you said, there's half that want to live in reality and half that don't.
right.
And I don't know if there's any coming back from it at this point. So I don't know what the future holds. I'm cautiously optimistic that we can come back from this as a country, but I really don't know. And only time will tell. So, but she's bad
Yeah,
news.
she's terrible news. The fact that more people are hunting and more people are interested in getting kind of back, I just see the shift. I think people that lie about cattle never was going to work long term. We're not wired to believe that kind of nonsense on like just a basic human level. That was just not, that was too far. So I think people are wanting to eat whole food now. You've seen this like trend to drinking whole milk and eating animal products. That's kind of all resurging. More people are hunting, there's more interest in that. So that gives me a little bit of hope that more people are choosing to live in reality,
Mm-hmm.
which is, and that's not even political. I'm not saying red is reality, blue is that's not the divide I'm talking about. I
Right.
think it's a little less simplistic than that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it truly I mean, I would say there's probably more people on the red side of it in reality, if I'm being honest, but it's just as simple as, are you going to choose to deal with the world as it is and your impact on the world as it is, or not? And are you going to choose to live on the internet, which you can live in a state of delusion if you want to and order DoorDash for 90 years. That's how great America is.
I don't think you're going to live to 90 if you're eating DoorDash every
No,
day,
true.
but You
Sure.
might if you go out and butcher your own cow or shoot your own deer. So
Yeah, there you
there's
go.
that. Well, Keely, I appreciate the time as always. Thanks for jumping on here, and I love following along on your page. I learn stuff on there all the time, so thanks for keeping us informed. It's American Unwon on Instagram, and that's where I primarily see you. Do you have Facebook and YouTube and all that stuff as well?
Yeah, I do. It's America Unwon. So just America, no N, UNWON. So AmericaOnone.com. And then I'm on YouTube a little bit, but mostly Instagram and X
Okay.
sometimes. So, and same to you, Cable. I love your page. I always learn a lot from you on the hunting side. So thank you.
Well, likewise, likewise. Well, hey, I know you've got a little one that's new since the last time we talked, so
Yes,
congrats
sir.
on
Yeah.
that. Being a dad is like the best thing in my life, so I'm sure you're experiencing this new phase of life, and it's a wonderful
Oh,
thing.
yeah. It's the best. It's so great. Makes it a little harder to schedule my time right now, but it's
Yeah.
worth it.
Well, thanks for making time for us. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Love being on
All
the
right.
show.
Take
Take
care.
care. Bye.